Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 8, Empathy. Empathy. This one came in from Darwin Fajardo. Darwin's probably smiling because, obviously that's not how you say your name. Darwin Fajardo. I'm just reminded when I first moved to California, I remember a new owner named Jason who walks into the lobby of people waiting for an interview, and he asked if Jesus was there. Is Jesus here? And I'm like, I better learn that J sounds like an H, and I better learn how to roll a couple R's. So Darwin Fajardo. I hope I got that right, Darwin. So Darwin's an interesting cat. He asks, why is empathy important to lead an organization? Now, anybody that knows Darwin, he's one of these guys. Last year, on the Quill campaign, he made over $100,000. Okay, as a rep, making six figures. That's always impressive. And over my career, I have worked with a lot of guys, girls, just people that know how to be unbelievable producers. And they get frustrated when the people around them just aren't performing at their level, and can be very frustrating. And so I recommended a book to Darwin, Tim Grover's book, Relentless. I'm like, hey, Darwin, read this book. Anybody who's a real high achiever and having a tricky time trying to build a team, this episode might be for you. That book, it's interesting in that book. It's written by Tim Grover. Tim Grover made a name for himself by becoming Michael Jordan's personal trainer. That's initially how he got his foot in the door. And so he knows the psychology of MJ very well. And then later on, actually, Jordan would pay him to not coach other people. Talk about being good at your job. Jordan would say, hey, listen, I'm going to pay you to coach me and only me. I'm going to coach you to not coach other people. And then when Michael was finally done with him, he opened the floodgates. Kobe shows up, Dwayne Wade shows up, all this good stuff. And so I said, I think you're going to relate a lot to this book, because I think that you and MJ, what a nice compliment. You, MJ, Kobe, you're cut from the same cloth. You read that book, it's kind of like, wow, I'm a lot like Michael. I'm a lot like Kobe. We're just relentless. Just like, what does it take to win? And you just go after it. And again, the tricky part is, well, listen, you're playing a team sport here. This isn't tennis, where you just got to be the best player against another great player. No, you've got to elevate your team, and that's how you're going to win championships. I remember one time an interview with Phil Jackson, and he was asked, hey, you've coached, 11 championship teams. You've had, Michael on your team. You've had Kobe on your team. What's the difference between those two guys? We know the similarities. What's the difference? And Phil, he thought about it. And he says, I think Michael learned leadership just a little earlier than Kobe. Again, these were guys that were just unbelievable producers that at some point in time in their late 20s, mid 20s, early 30s had to really figure out, listen, this isn't about me. This is about the collective we. Everybody's game has to level up. That's my job as a leader. Everybody's game's got to level up. So the answer is really going to be empathy. Now, I certainly don't claim to be an expert, so even weird for me to talk about this. Just a cheeky little story. I remember when I was first learning the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and I was a newlywed, at that time. So this would have been 18 years ago. My wife's like, hey, what do you learn? What do you think you're really good at? What are you struggling with? I'm like, hey, by far of the 7 habits, the one that I'm struggling with is habit 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And she's listening. She goes, yeah, you're more like seek first to be understood, and if time permits, then maybe understand. And I'm like, yeah, maybe I should call Stephen Covey and can we change the book? So yeah, I had a lot of maturing to do. And again, I don't claim to be an expert in empathy. It's something that I knew was a blind spot of mine years ago, something I've consciously been working towards, but I'm still a novice, in this department. But I thought I'd share that with you. Empathy was never a strong suit, certainly something I've had to learn. This I know to be true. Okay, here's a truth bomb. We won't always remember what people taught us. We might not always remember what people did for us. We'll always remember how that person made us feel. Right? If you think about it, you're going to remember how you felt about being around other people. There's certain people in your life that when they call and you see their number popping up on your screen or their picture on your screen, you can't wait to answer that phone. Or you get a text from somebody like you can't wait to start some dialogue, get engaged here. And there's others that, just, again, how do you make people around you feel is the question. And again, the answer is, can you improve your empathy? Can you level up your empathy? Can you truly understand what other people are feeling? Can you relate to other people? And in many times, that's the fuel and the only fuel your team may need to level up, to step up. Again, just another little cheeky story. So I remember being a new leader and I'm frustrated, in the team building process. I'm frustrated. Things aren't going well. And I ask one of the managers, hey, can I talk to you real quick? And I go in and I'm just vomiting like negatives all over the table. Well, this is going on and this is going on. And he's sitting there, he's looking at me, he's not saying a word, just listening, nodding, making eye contact, not dozing off, not checking his phone. And then at the end of it, after I was kind of finally done vomiting, he says, hey, you want to go for a beer? And I'm like, yeah, I actually really do want to go for a beer right now. And we didn't talk anymore about this. Advice was not offered to me. I was not given any direction. I was just heard. Okay? Effective listening is the psychological oxygen that we all crave. We want to be listened to. We want to be heard. We want to be understood. And there's some skills in that. I remember years ago, we were at a leaders meeting and there was a Q&A with Gary Polson, okay? And the question was asked, it was Sebastian Angus that asked this question, and it was a great question and wasn't rehearsed. Gary didn't have time to think about this, but the question was asked, hey, Gary, what do you think you're world class at? What do you think you're world class at? And, I'm like, I wonder how Gary's going to answer this. I'm thinking there's a lot of things he's really good at, and I expected it to be something related to business. And he says, he's very thoughtful. He paused, he thought, he says, I think I'm great, world class at reading children's books. And I'm like, what? Like, where did that come from? You think you're world class at reading children's books? So I wrote that down. I followed up with Gary a couple weeks later and I'm like, hey, you've got my curiosity. You said you think you're world class at reading kids' books. He says, yeah, something I've really worked on. It's something I'm really good at. And, now Gary's a grandfather and he's in his sweet spot. These are the best years of his life. He's giving me and everybody else a lot to look forward to. But yeah, if you're world class at reading books and you've got grandkids, he's kicking butt. Gary's doing really well in life. And so, I'd like to learn. You're world class at this. I'm curious. I'd like to learn. Little did I realize, the next time I met up with Gary, so we met up at a local restaurant in Brentwood, and Gary's like, hey, Jamie, asked the question how I'm world class at this. I brought a kid's book, and I can't remember what the kid's book was, but here we are in a restaurant, just a little 2-person table. We're surrounded by other business people. Everybody's wearing suits and stuff like this, right? So it's a business lunch happening everywhere around us. And here's Gary reading this children's book to me. Again, I didn't expect him to role play here. I wasn't expecting to go for lunch and go in with the mentality of a child. But he's reading the book to me like I'm a little kid. And again, he's reading. So Jamie, like, how does that make you feel? How does that make you feel? And I'm like, angry? I'm just kind of like getting into these raw little childhood emotions. And I'm telling you, he read this book to me for like 30 minutes. And I got the message loud and clear. Yes, dude is world class at reading kids' books. He gave me a book. Of course, I was curious because, I was, new at having children. And he's like, I've got this book for you here, Jamie. How to talk so your kids will listen and how to listen so your kids will talk. Oh, just the premise of that book is real interesting because, yeah, as life goes on, I want my kids to want to talk to me. I don't want them get quiet and not share. And, I want to experience, what's going on. And the key is empathy. Like, do you take the time to really listen, to focus, to not get distracted, but do you take the time to truly listen, to truly feel how another person's feeling? Stephen Covey in one of his courses said, and they did this role playing, Stephen and a woman from the audience role playing, she was taking on the role of her son who just didn't want to take on a job. And Stephen was like really trying to peel the onion. And he said, through this long, almost painful exercise, he says, empathic listening is the fastest form of communication. And I'm like, not what I just saw for the last 10 minutes. It was slow. But because you don't have to have multiple conversations after, because you got to the heart of the matter in that one conversation, it is the fastest form of communication. And I'm like, interesting. I'm buying in. I want to be more effective as a communicator. So really, if you want to be more effective, if you want to provide people the psychological oxygen that we're all craving, you have to know how to really listen. You have to listen with the intent to feel what the other person's feeling. My daughter, it was interesting, when we had a dog pass away a little while ago, and I was sharing with her a story when my first dog died, and she's like, "Oh, Dad, what happened?" And I'm telling her the story, as I'm telling her the story of my first experience with death with a pet, and she's looking at me, and her face, as she's listening to me, her face starts like she starts pouting, and then a tear starts coming down her eye, and the next thing you know, I'm crying as I'm telling her the story, and I'm like, how did you do this? How did you get this out of me? And I'm like, man, this girl knows how to listen with empathy. I was blown away. And again, what an interesting way to bond. What a way to just connect with somebody. So Darwin, again, you are a rock star. You are Kobe Bryant. You are Michael Jordan. You are Darwin Fajardo. And you know how to be one of the best producers we've ever had. And if the goal is to become one of the best reproducers and really level up and step up the game in team building, the key is really going to be empathy. It's going to be listening. And it's all tied into your leadership. And that's really going to help your people elevate to that next level, because you are the model. You are the example of what you want people to be. And now it's just a matter of really listening, understanding where they're coming from, really hearing what some of the shortcomings may be or challenges may be. And I'm telling you, your model combined with empathy is going to elevate people's games around you. So keep it up, Darwin. Thanks for listening, you guys, and I'll talk to you soon.